Hello, everyone. My name is Sandra Phillips. I'm a Waka Waka woman from Queensland, and I am honoured today to host the inaugural NAIDOC Week Lecture series for NIDA. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that today's NAIDOC Week NIDA Lecture is being presented on the unceded lands of the Bidjigal and Gadigal peoples of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past and present and thank them for their custodianship of their land and cultural practices. I also acknowledge the other First Nations peoples in the room, in the theatre today, most notably, of course, our inaugural lecturer, who I will shortly introduce. I'm coming to you today from the lands of the Turrbal and Jagera peoples in Meanjin, also known as Brisbane. If you would indulge me on behalf of the NIDA Board and the organisation of NIDA to share with you some of the recent principles that the Institute has designed to demonstrate its principled commitment to ongoing transformation and change at NIDA. We have witnessed sweeping protests for change around the globe, including in Australia. This movement comes on top of the decades of First Nations change-making on our own continent. This ongoing global moment has become an invitation to make a better world beyond racism and inequality. We at NIDA, through all of its ranks, all of its various demographic makeups, all of the people as part of the alumni and ongoing community, staff, students, and the governance body most particularly, the governance body accepts that invitation. In the wake of concerns raised earlier this year by students and alumni about NIDA's own record of action, we, as the NIDA Board, committed ourselves to 7 key principles, 3 of which I would like to speak to now. We recognise the sovereignty of First Nations peoples. We affirm our support for the lives, well-being, dignity, and creative agency of First Nations peoples and people of colour. We see that this support comes with a duty to act. And thirdly, for today, in acknowledging the powerful role that the arts play in Australia, we also must acknowledge our key responsibility in supporting anti-racism and decolonisation. As a leader in the training of world-class performers and other professionals in the national and international performing arts, NIDA acknowledges it has a role to play in being part of global change. To that end, this inaugural lecture is part of a 10-year commitment for an annual NAIDOC lecture, 2020 to 2030. This will be an annual commissioned lecture delivered by a First Nations leader in the arts and cultural sector every NAIDOC week. So now to our wonderful inaugural lecturer, Ursula Yovich. It is with great pleasure I introduce our inaugural guest lecturer for the NAIDOC Week Lecture Series, the wonderful actor, playwright, singer and songwriter, Ursula Yovich. Ursula grew up in Darwin and Maningrida in the Northern Territory and has created an extraordinary career in the performing arts on stage, television and film. Ursula is the writer and performer of works including Magpie Blues, The Man with the Iron Neck, and Barbara and the Camp Dogs, which was co-written, which Ursula co-wrote with Alana Valentine. And in talking with Ursula before the live stream today, it would be remiss not to mention the magic hour, which Ursula says, tells me was written by Vanessa Banks and is one of her favourite ever shows. So I'd love to hear more about that from you, Ursula, as we go on. Ursula, of course, was a recipient of the Balnaves Foundation Indigenous Playwrights Award, and she is a multi-award-winning actor. Her stage and film credits include Wayne Blair's Top End Wedding, Baz Luhrmann's Australia, Ivan Sen's Goldstone, and Ray Lawrence's Jindabyne. On television, Ursula has had leading roles in The Code, Devil's Dust, Red Fur Now, The Gods of Wheat Street, and most recently, the third series of Wanted. Not only an amazingly creative force in the performing arts, Ursula is a highly respected cultural advocate and leader, a powerful voice that shares the stories and lived experiences of First Nations Australians. Ursula, welcome to NIDA and our inaugural NAIDOC Week Lecture.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I would also like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, on whose land we all stand. I pay my respects to the elders past and present. Thank you, NIDA, for inviting me here to speak at the inaugural NAIDOC Lecture Series. I trust that the following years will have many wonderful, thought-provoking lectures from some of the best in the arts world. Happy NAIDOC Week, everyone. My name is Ursula. I'm a Brada woman from northwest Arnhem Land, a little community called Maningrida. I'm also a Serbian woman with very strong ties to Serbia and Bosnia. Now, when I was a little girl, I loved singing. I wanted to be a singer. I'd wake up at 6 a.m. every morning on a weekend, just to watch Rage. I wouldn't get up early during the weekdays because of school, but weekend, yes, 6 a.m. I didn't get my musical influence from my father or any other family members. I got it from TV and radio. So it was always commercial music, top 40s, Rage, Countdown. I loved Tina Arena, John Farnham, Something for Kate, Crowded House, Wendy Matthews, In Excess, Australian Crawl, Midnight Oil and Ice House. But I never felt that I could actually become a singer, because that career path was not for people like me. Definitely not for a small town Aboriginal girl. I was from the kind of people that the news depicted as criminals, alcoholics, down and out long grasses that needed to be removed from the city because they were an eyesore. But then, one day, that all changed for me. I woke up early as usual, turned on the TV, sat down and watched my Rage. But that morning, I witnessed Whitney Houston for the first time. And she was singing, "I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way." She was singing to me. And she was glamorous. But most importantly, she was someone that I could relate to because her dark skin matched mine. And she was in this position of power that I hadn't seen my own mob or anyone of my colour in before. She was admired for her talent, her personality, her character. So that there was when I knew that I was going to be a professional singer. That was my first sliding doors moment. I went from, oh, I could never dream of doing that, to, oh, I can do that, and I can do it really well. So that's why I'm here, talk about change and culture, specifically about cultural change within the arts industry and how important it is for diverse representation on our screens and on our stage. Because without that, without me seeing someone like Whitney Houston, I wasn't being acknowledged as part of the society that I was living in. Change. So who doesn't like change? That new workout routine or the new wake-up time? Come on, I know you don't like change. I don't like change because I'm a creature of habit. And sometimes change can be jarring, abrupt. But the reality is it mostly happens gradually because we're in constant motion. The world is not stagnant. Change is vital. Seasons. Each day is never like the one before. And even we change, the human body, the mind, the spirit. It's always in movement. Our culture. What's culture? Culture is a set of values and customs, marriage and family, government, law, games, leisure, economy, trade, language, religion, art, literacy, painting, philosophy. These are the things that connect us as a society. Now, I'm not going to speak about governments, laws, economy and trade because I don't know anything about that, but I do want to speak about customs and languages and art and core values. Okay, so now we know what makes up a culture. So I want to know more about our culture. So we'll start with the customs. What are our shared customs as a nation? This was actually really hard, like I was looking it up, I'm like, Australian customs. I kept getting border control. Anyway, of course, some of our customs and beliefs will differ. But what are our shared Australian customs? NAIDOC Week. Even though our government just recently sided with One Nation to vote down a motion to fly the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flag in Parliament during NAIDOC Week. But yeah, we celebrate NAIDOC Week as a nation. Meat pies at the footy, muck-up day, two-up, birthdays, the backyard barbecue, a seafood Christmas, bring a plate of food. Labor Day, Remembrance Day, Invasion Day, Chinese New Year, Boxing Day cricket, St. Patrick's Day, Valentine's Day, International Women's Day. But nothing is specific to this country. Nothing is steeped in old, ancient traditions, except, of course, the First Nations customs and law. Most everything is borrowed, and perhaps that's okay. That can be our beginning for our change. You see, we're not a British colony anymore. We were first Aboriginal, First Nations, always was, always will be. But now we are immigrants and asylum seekers, we are disabled and LGBTQI. For me, Australian culture is one that encompasses diverse groups of people from all over the world. That is present-day Aussie culture. So what about core values? What are they? What are our internal beliefs on how we should live? I know I like to live with integrity and respect, honesty, compassion. I believe wholeheartedly in education, freedoms, loyalty, autonomy, advancement, and growth. And there's so much more out there that makes us, same, but a little bit different. So if our shared core values are similar, and some of our customs are also similar, then why is diversity in the arts sector an uphill battle? You see, art is such an integral and vital part of any culture. It reflects back at us what's happening in our societies, in our communities, in our families, our homes, our politics. Here's an example. Banjo Paterson and Henry Lawson, both 18th century Australian poets. One's view of the Australian bush was about hardship and misery and isolation, while the other viewed it with a witty playfulness and mateship. They both reflected the place and time that they were living in, what they saw and what the people needed at the time. Albert Namatjira painted the McDonald Ranges in watercolours, and many people saw his paintings as a success to the assimilation policies. But later on they saw that within his paintings was knowledge and connection to his country, because that's what he saw. Now these artists, they show us ourselves and they show us our history, where we came from. Contemporary Australian culture is an array of colours, tones, languages, foods, smells and textures. It is incredibly rich. We live in a diverse community. We live inclusivity every single day. It's in our interactions on the streets, in restaurants, cafes, waiting rooms. We marry into diverse families. So inclusivity shouldn't be something we have to think about or have to think hard about. We shouldn't be thinking about quotas or ticking boxes because that's seen to be doing the right thing. We should be thinking in stories and connections. Now, I just came from a cafe in Marrickville called the Vespa, and my agent Naomi met me there, and I love going to this cafe. It's just up the road from my place. I go there in my pyjamas sometimes. It's owned by a first-generation Vietnamese man by the name of Van. He grew up in Cabramatta. He's a real larrikin. Now, a lot of people are drawn to this cafe because the staff and Van are warm and friendly, and they make you feel like you're part of the family. Now, there's this one man in particular that everyone had kind of developed a soft spot for. He was a customer. His name was Gary. Now, Gary lived in a shelter in the neighbourhood. He was homeless. He was homeless probably because he had a disability. He was always cheerful. And he'd come in most days and give everyone a fist pump. Then he'd sit down at a table, usually the one near the door, so he could watch the world. And he'd have his usual coffee and banana bread. And we'd ask him, "How are you, Gary? How's your day going? What are you doing for the rest of the day?" And he would answer in his own way, mumbling, nodding, smiling, giving a thumbs up. Even though Gary was homeless and, lived in a shelter, he always paid for his coffee and banana bread. It wasn't always the correct amount, but Van and the staff didn't worry about that because he always made the effort to make any kind of payment, even if it was just $2. Last week I was thinking of Gary because I hadn't seen him in a while. I sat down at the Vespa and Van came out and had a little chat, which he usually does if it's not too busy. And I asked how he was, and he said to me, "Oh, I'm not too good today." He said Gary passed away a couple of days before. He had moved to another shelter during COVID, a shelter that could support him and his cancer treatments. And I felt this really deep sadness come over me. I thought, I'm never going to see that cheery soul again. I'm never going to have a, fist pump and his little mumbled chats and his banana bread face, and he had this funny lopsided grin. When we include all people, we get a rich tapestry of what our culture is. We get the finer details, and most importantly, we get to feel deeply. But when we continue to churn out a dysmorphic view of our world in the arts, this abnormal and monochromatic view of our society, we miss out on meeting our Garys of the world, and we don't get to hear his story. We have a long way to go, but we are on that path, even though we're moving at a snail's pace. We have wonderful stories out there that reflect other parts of our community as a whole. Top End Wedding, Mystery Road, Gods of Wheat Street. Yeah, a bit of shameless plugging there, but it was actually really hard to find these shows. Family Law, it's one of my favourites, Fresh Off the Boat. But that's not enough. We need to see more of these diverse stories. So how do we challenge the status quo? Well, it starts in the schools. It starts in the way we teach. It starts in the way we learn. It starts here at NIDA. It's about creating safe spaces and a place where our students and teachers can feel comfortable enough to tell their stories and not be judged. Now, I want you all to have a look around you, a good look, and I want you to see your classmates, your schoolmates, the ones that you hang out with all the time and the ones that you don't always mix with for whatever reasons. These are the people that you'll be working with over the next 10, 20, 30 years, 40 onwards until you decide to retire. These people are the ones that will fill in the future roles of directorship, acting, writers, producers. These people are our leaders and our storytellers. So you guys will be the ones pulling the strings. Be nice to each other. Connect, share your stories, listen, pay attention, and approach everything with an open heart. So your role today, from today onwards, working in theatre, film, the arts, is that you must reflect the current context in which you live and reside in. Tap into that potential. The world is big. Create a platform for those worlds. Thank you.
Thank you, Ursula. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's odd for me here because I'm disembodied and I'm disconnected from you all. So, but I can feel the warmth in the theatre. That was a wonderful inaugural lecture for the series. So many things to think about. So what we'll be doing now is perhaps you and I can have a bit of a yarn, and then if people in the theatre audience have any questions, there will be some collecting of those questions and put in chat so that I can ask them to you through the Zoom, so that the 60 plus other participants who are watching in the live stream of the Zoom will be able to hear you, as well as the live stream of the Facebook. So there are a lot of things you gave us to think about there. I particularly love you giving a story from your daily life, the story of Van and Gary, and the details you gave about Gary, and how you made us think about the details of people and daily life and how that connects to broader, bigger picture life and the world overall and how we see ourselves. So I know that you've recently taken a break from the stage, but if you could reflect for us on what are those kind of details that you take into performance with you for work on the stage, for telling stories from the stage?
Jeez. I come across as shy sometimes, like when you first meet me, but I do have this tendency, especially within my community in Marrickville, of striking up conversations. There's a fella down at Woolies that sits down and plays, he's also homeless, but he plays his guitar. And he has his dog there with him, and sometimes if I don't have money to give, I'll, have a quick little chat with him. For me, these people become part of my story. I remember living in Redfern, and I don't know if I can tell this story, but it was in Barbara and the Camp Dogs. I decided to put this in the major monologue at the end of the piece, and there was this old auntie. It was morning, and I sat out on the road, the sidewalk. My neighbour was this guy called Devante. He was a Māori singer, guitar player, and we used to have our morning teas just outside on the pavement, and we'd chat. And this old girl came up, and she was a little bit charged up, and you could feel this sadness and a mixture of sadness, anger, and she came up and she was talking about how, she came up and asked if we had a cigarette first, and then we said nothing because, neither of us smoked, and then the police were doing their usual patrol around Redfern. And then she starts swearing at him. And then she turned back to us and said she said the C word. They took my bong, and I was like, what? And she goes, yeah, I was on the bridge and they took my bong. I was like, oh, okay, I'm really sorry to hear that. And she said, they came to her and they took it, but it was just the way she said it. She's like, they took it. And I said to them, that's what you do. You take things. She was like talking to the police. You take things. It's you mob now who took my kids. And I'll always remember that. And it was this ache that was coming out of her. But that went in the play because I'd seen that so many times, I've seen that at home. They're those little details that I think are important. They become part of you, your stories. But I think we can kind of really expand on that more, Barbara and the Camp Dog was about, I didn't want people to like her, I wanted people to come and see and understand where she was coming from.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, thank you so much. I'm not from the theatre, of course, but I've often thought about that, the challenge of turning up every day and having to channel all these different characters and attributes and, sadnesses and joys through your body. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and, the upside as well as the challenges, I guess?
Yeah, look, it can be challenging because I think with anything, your body, you tap into certain emotions, your body's going to believe it, Yeah, if you're doing the old cry on stage, yeah, we're acting, but at some point, somewhere in your body, somewhere in your psyche, your emotions, it actually becomes real. And so it is, it can be challenging at times because you can go in flat, but yeah, you have to tap into those places. I mean, I know that's for me. I work from that place, and I always have because I want to be able to feel those characters. Yeah, I think it's also about knowing how to look after yourself once you're out of that space, out of that story. I think we need to put a lot more emphasis on, I was going to say self-help then, self-care and self-love, yeah.
Sure, and clearly you're continuing your work in television and film. Are those, is the media that that you participate through screen different from performing on stage where you don't have much distance between yourself and your audience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely pros and cons. I mean, I love theatre because it is such a reciprocation. I don't know if that's the right word, but the energies that are in the room it's very much alive. I mean, I remember a friend of mine going up to his upright piano and he goes, come over here, Ursh, and he opened the lid up and he shouted into the piano and it kind of vibrated back. And he goes, that's what theatre is, you know, you're giving your energy and everyone's giving it back to you. So I love that. I always love that, and that's what I miss when I do film and television. What I like about film and television is you get to wake up super early, like 5 o'clock in the morning, and then you get home at a reasonable hour. So you feel like you're actually in the world a lot more than when you're doing theatre. I felt like I had to, when working in theatre, you can't do too much during the day because you'd have a show at night that you're going to have to, you know, give everything over to. So you put your life on hold a little bit. But, you know, you do it for the love sometimes, and I don't regret any of it.
So there's the performing dimension, and you're also a writer for stage and screen. So someone in the theatre has asked a question around what advice would you give to people starting out who are looking to write for stage and or screen?
See, I'm still learning. I think I'm always going to be learning. I think the main thing is you write out all your stories. Like, if it's a story that's close to you, like Barbara was close to me, so it was, you know, a whole mixture of, you know, stories, mine, my family members, Alana's experiences, and then we kind of sat down and put something together. And I was lucky in that sense because I had someone who was really experienced as a writer, kind of help me through that process. I think read as much as you can, find the plays that you love and really admire, read them over and over again, write them out. You'll get a sense of what that style is. Understand structure, and, you know, like, just read as much as you can and write as much as you can. And if you can, I mean, there are a lot of things out there that you can get a hold of that teach you about structure and writing, and then, you know, get someone on board to read it and give you their feedback, and hopefully you get onto that path of getting a dramaturg on board that can, you know, help you structure it a bit more and tell you what's missing or you know, what's great. It really is a process. Barbara and the Camtogs, I think, overall took about 8 years to finally get up to stage, so it takes a while. Wow. Doesn't have to take that long though either, like but yeah, it can take a while, but it doesn't have to take that long.
Wonderful, but great advice, Ursula. Now, there's another question here from Liz. What was your most satisfying role and why?
Oh, geez. It was actually Barbara and the Camtogs. I played Barbara. I'd gotten kind of fed up with the industry at one point because I was always called in. I shouldn't say always, I always say always. You know, I generally get called in to play just Aboriginal roles, but I know I'm more than just the colour of my skin. Now, I'm never going to be able to write, I shouldn't say never, but I wasn't going to write about an experience outside of myself, so I wanted to really challenge myself. And you know, Barbara was the one. She was my role of a lifetime, I guess, because she was tough and she was complicated and she was likeable and not likeable as well. She was sassy. It was everything that I wanted in a role that I couldn't get in the industry at the time. So yeah, she was definitely my most challenging role. I think I almost died doing it. So I'm glad I did it. That's what I wanted to do, and I know she's out there now, and you know, hopefully I get to see someone else do her. But yeah, I'd have to say Barbara.
Do you think of Barbara during your everyday? Does she come to you?
Not so much these days. I think Barbara was my 30s, because through my 20s I was all about, you know, just enjoying things and discovering new experiences, meeting new people, kind of getting myself, you know, within the industry. My 30s were my angry years, so I felt like I was fighting against the industry quite a bit. You know, I'm like, why am I doing that role? Why am I going for this role? And what's wrong with this character? Why is it so two-dimensional? Why don't we have more in there? So I was fighting a lot. She was angry, and she was angry because, sorry, she was angry. I'm talking in third person. I was angry because I kind of felt like I was lesser than other artists because I couldn't show my artistry. So my 30s were, I was so angry. And now that I'm 40, it's so strange. It's like I want to just chill out. I want to be able to still talk about these things, but I don't have that fuel, that fire, that anger there anymore. There's more understanding here, and I want to be able to, be calm. And, you know, whatever knowledge I have to be able to share.
Oh, well, you're doing that today. That's wonderful. I used to say, I think it's changing a little bit, but I used to say that if a person, you know, landed on Earth from another planet and watched Australian television, they'd be mistaken for thinking that Australia was populated only by white-skinned people. I think that's changing a little bit, but in terms of screen and stage work, you talked about diversity earlier. Mm-hmm. So how do you see, you know, more difference happening on stages and on screens in Australia? What do we need to do?
So I just recently saw Cody Bedford's play at Belvoir, and you know, it followed this, I'm so terrible with names, I can't remember the character names, but it followed this young Aboriginal girl and her, sorry? Bernadette. It followed Bernadette, who, and her relationship with her mum, who was, you know, she was a white fella. But her siblings were Asian and Italian. Maltese. And true God, I thought, oh, that's my family there, because, you know, my father's Serbian, I'm Aboriginal Serbian, my sister's Serbian Filipino. I've got a niece who's, you know, Bangladeshi. So we're all over the place. There are some plays and, you know, screen and television out there that kind of represents that, you know, you'd think, no, that couldn't possibly happen, you know, but these families exist, you know. There are really diverse families. My daughter's father just married a lovely Bangladeshi Muslim woman. So, you know, that's the extended family, and these stories, I've forgotten where I'm going now. These stories are out there, and they're slowly coming out, you know, like The Family Law is one of those shows that I love. It's set in an era that, you know, I grew up in, and it follows this family and how they're, you know, trying to integrate into Australia. Look, I think we still have a very, very long way to go. I don't watch Australian television that much because I don't see enough of that. I do watch a little bit, but not enough. There's not enough on there to keep me kind of staying, whereas I like to choose my stuff. That's why Stan and Netflix and all these streaming apps, whatever those things are. Now I'm talking like an old person, but those app thingamybobs, they give us that chance to step outside of our world. But it would be so great, it would be wonderful to see that diverse content come from this country, you know, because we have so many amazing stories out there.
Oh, what a great answer. Absolutely. So those streaming services, they deliver to us families of great complexity rather than homogeneity. I'm reminded, there's another question, I'll ask that soon, but I'm reminded of one of my sisters was cast for an ad one time, TV ad, and she wanted to be on the beach and have her daughter with her. So she thought she'd take her daughter along to be cast as well. Guess what? Mother was black-skinned, daughter was fair-skinned, so they couldn't cast the mother and daughter together.
Yeah.
This is the thing that you're talking about, that, you know, we're denying this kind of diversity within our realities.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely. I've come across that too, where I've had to say no. Within some families, there is that real rainbow colours, you know, and yeah, I mean, my sister's a little bit fairer than me. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm probably fairer now because I've been here, New South Wales, getting cold, and not back home in Darwin. But yeah, within my own family, we go from super dark to, you know, blonde, blue eyes. So
For sure, exactly. Now, there is another question on the chat here, and it's another advice-seeking question. So what advice would you give to non-Indigenous directors and storytellers who want to tell Indigenous stories? And the second bit, sorry, Ursula, is any suggestions on how to work with respect and heart?
Oh, that's a hard one. In some respects, we're still moving slowly. The stories are there. There's this kind of pool of amazingness. I personally would rather see those black stories told by black people, by our mob. But if you do decide to go into that direction, then yes, it's all about respect and following. Look, it's common sense, really. It's talking to the writers, talking to those communities, listening to them, because it is their story. Even if you are directing it, this is still, you know, someone else's story. So it's about being respectful of that story, and respectful of the people whose story it is. Yeah, it's a hard one. Just trying to think. Yeah, if it's something that really resonates with you, then do it, but be respectful and follow the correct protocols. And if it's something that's cultural, then I would probably say, yeah, probably let someone else who is actually Indigenous do that story.
Thank you, Ursula. It's always a tough one to answer, isn't it? But rest assured, it always gets asked. Now, earlier you were yarning about the magic hour.
Yep.
Like, how far from reality can we get? These are fairy tale characters. Tell us what you did in the magic hour and what you think the real strength and heart of that work was.
The Magic Hour was a one-woman show that Vanessa Bates wrote about, these very well-known fairy tales, Rapunzel, Cinderella. But the spin she gave on it was that those stories were retold, but through some of the lesser characters, like, you know, the stepmother or the ugly stepsister. And so she really wanted to hear about these particular women and go, what you know, they're so underwritten, and it's all about, you know, the good and evil. And she just wanted to kind of delve into them and go, well, you know, what was really going on? You know, what if the ugly sister was like a 15-year-old who was trying to be cool, but she was really awkward and, you know, had braces or what, you know. So yeah, this was a one-woman show. And I think what I was telling you, that I performed that once just in front of 10 people. We toured it, and this one time we had 10 people. And I know a lot of actors go, oh my God, well, I don't want to do this, you know, it's only 10 people. But I remember thinking, oh yeah, let's just do it. You know, these people paid, and it was one of the best shows I'd ever done, because I really got to see every single person in the audience, and I got to really talk to them. It felt like a one-on-one conversation. And yeah, I think that's what the arts is for me. It's about that, yeah, true connection at times. And, you know, sometimes you are performing, and at other times you're just, it's like sitting with your family and having a yarn.
That is so powerful. I'm imagining you and that audience, and the respect that they would have felt too, having you perform for them and to them. Do you think they were kind of recognising attributes in these characterisations, these recharacterisations that you were performing? You know, the so-called ugly stepsister, you know, or yeah.
Oh, yeah, I mean, maybe not the fellas, but yeah, us girls, I mean, I was like, I'll totally get these characters. I think I've been through all of those of, you know, we're actually very complex beings. And so that's what we should be writing. That's what we should be showing up on stage, you know. We're complex. You know, I actually want to see the story of, you know, a black woman falling in love with a trans man, or I want to see these stories. I want to see that story about Gary. What did he get up to, you know, after he came to the coffee shop? Did he just, you know, go for walks up and down Illawarra Road and, you know, look in shops? Or did he go, I'm curious. I want to know. I want to see these stories. We are complex beings. And I know, you know, you stages and you've got an hour and a half, 2 hours to tell, you know, a massive story, but I think it can be done.
And so on that, you referred to your mother, of course, and your father. Can you tell us a little bit about what you draw down from both those sets of heritage, liveliness?
I get my acting from my dad. My dad's Serbian. If you ever met him, he's, I mean, as with a lot of, this is such a cliched stereotype, but he loves using his hands. But not only that, my father will tell you a story, and I've heard all of his stories like 100 times before, but he will get on the actual floor and start showing you what he did. You know, when he talks about the time when he was walking across the river and it was frozen over, but this one part of the river was thin. The ice was thin, and he could hear it kind of making that, I can see his face now, and he'd hold his hands like this, and he goes, I go, okay, Dad, I've heard this story before, but he'd go, the ice would make the sound, and he said, oh, lucky for me, I was very smart. You see, he still has this wonderful thick accent, and he'd get on the ground and he'd go, I get on my belly, and I slide across. He said, because the centre of gravity was then, you know, dispersed, and he didn't fall through the ice and get swept away with the current. Yeah, my storytelling comes from my father. Unfortunately, I didn't really know much about my Serbian ties growing up. My father is an immigrant, and he really pushed for us to learn English, even though English was actually my second language because we spoke Brada at home. My mother and her family were always there, so, you know, we spoke Brada and sometimes English. But I also didn't grow up much with my mother because when I was 8, she'd left, and so my father brought us up, a single parent with 4 black kids, single immigrant parent with 4 Aboriginal kids. So my experience from my blackness comes from my skin colour. I've experienced what it is to be a black person in this country because of my skin colour. I don't have anything else to kind of draw from other than that. I mean, I do know my family back in Maningrida. I've gone and visited. I can understand little bits of language still now, but it's not as strong as it used to be. But in regards to culture and traditions, they're the things that I missed out on because of not being around that. And losing language was because of the lack of use. There's no one in Darwin that really spoke it. So, yeah. So I'm, in a sense, first generation immigrant, as well as being here, you know, blood ties to 60,000 years.
Thank you so much. What a great story, and you know it so well, clearly, from your dad. I'm sure he's got a whole lot more as well. I did see a clip that you made around Brada, is it? Language words?
Yes,
I
yes.
love you. The word for water, was it? You said it sounds like water.
Sounds Bugala.
Bugala, yeah.
Bugala. Yeah, I mean, it's Northwest Arnhem Land, and a lot of people think of Yolngu, but it's a very different language. Like, there's so many different languages. We're so close, but they are actual very separate languages. Yeah, Bukala. Mother is Muma. Father is Nyinya. Fish is Jijitja. I don't know why I remember that, but I do.
All the important things. That's what we remember most. Mother, father, fish.
Quality food.
Fantastic. Now we do have another question through chat then. How did you learn to perform? Did you go to drama school or study formally?
I did go to ACPA, the Aboriginal Centre for the Performing Arts, back in '96, and back then it was in Perth. It's now in Brisbane. I just did a year there, and I actually auditioned for NIDA and WAPA and BCA, and I got in, and I was kind of umming and ahhing, and I decided not to do it because I got my first gig with Neil Armfield doing The Governor's Family in '97. So I was really fortunate to go straight into work, and then did a lot of cruising back home a lot. When I didn't have work, I'd just go back home to Darwin and just, yeah, be there. I think acting is all about truth-telling, isn't it? It's honesty, it's about people watching, like, watch people. I do this thing where I watch people and I'll make up a little story about them in my mind. I learned as much as I could in that year, but it was a bridging course, so we did tap dancing, we did contemporary dance, we did Indian dance, which was a lot of fun. I actually really loved that. A lot of music and singing and a little bit of acting there. So yeah, I got to, yeah. But I think it's all about truth-telling. It's about being honest about the words and being honest about the piece and don't act. I remember one director telling me, less is more. And it is. It is. We put masks on, literally, but also figuratively speaking, we put on our masks every day, and we're not always honest about ourselves and who we are, but I don't even know where I was going with that thought. It's just...
it's beautiful, Ursula. I love listening to you. There's so much wisdom that you're sharing.
It's just being honest, I guess. I'm learning every day. Like, my first play, I was really fortunate. I had David Field, Jackie McKenzie, Aaron Blaby, Arthur Dingham, and Gillian Armstrong. So I was like in great hands. The older actors were giving me a lot of tips, and that's what we should do when we're, working, is watching and learning from the older ones, because they've been around for a while, and they have lived experience, but also, theatre experience.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
there's no more questions coming through on chat, and we've got 3 to 4 minutes left. And I might pose a question to you around where you started, which was around the question of change.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved how you layered that. You said, change, if you're a creature of habit.
Sorry?
You're a creature of habit. You shared that with us.
Yes, I can be. I love... Sorry.
Oh, I loved how you said that change can happen slowly and, in the small moments. So linking that insight to, the kind of industry context that we're addressing here today as well, how do you think, what is the best way to approach the question of change in the performing industries?
Oh, it's a hard one. This is just my opinion, and what I believe is it has to happen in our schools. There's no other way, because we're so kind of stuck in our beliefs or what we think we believe in, and school's the best way. And I say that thing where I say, look around at everyone, that you're actually, who your schoolmates are and your classmates, because they really are the ones that you're going to be working with. I wish I had someone tell me that, because the people that I ended up working with, they did graduate from ACPA as well, and they're the ones that I get to kind of, be creative with. So make those friends, make those connections, and make them really long-lasting friendships, because they're also your work colleagues in the future. I really do feel that the schools is where it's at. My daughter comes home and, they're so open to the world, and, they talk about, she's 12, they talk about sexuality and gender. They're so cluey. So I don't know why we shy away from that. We shy away from disability, race. I think it has to start when they're really young, because then it's just normal. We have to normalise that, because it is normal. We just have these barriers that are still there, but I don't know why. I think because they're not there when we're out there living in the world. Like, I go up to Vespa and Van, he's such a yobbo. He has such a full-on Aussie yobbo accent, and he has this gorgeous Vietnamese face, and because that's
wonderful. And I might close then on reflecting back some of the words you've shared with us today. Mm-hmm. I'm going to stay with the C words for now and miss that one C word. But compassion, core values, culture, customs, connections, and, you know, the big one, change, which you've addressed so beautifully for us today, Ursula. It's wonderful. Now, I have, you know, it's a bit with some regret that I do close the session today, but I do know that you and the NIDA CEO, Liz Hughes, and the Indigenous students of NIDA are going to be going off and having some nice time with each other, which is lovely. So can I call on the audiences, plural, I think there are 3 operating, to thank Ursula Yovich, the inaugural NAIDOC Lecture Series lecturer.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thank you.